This morning. It's over 24 hours and more since President Bola Ahmed Tinubu presented the annual budget before the National Assembly, and reactions have continued to trail its content, which includes the 2.18 trillion naira, 7.9% of the budget for education, 3.25 trillion naira for defense and security, social development and poverty reduction programs, just to mention a few. Now, reactions continue to, of course, trail the budget as opposition parties like the PDP stated that the budget is not thorough and would not alleviate the plight of the common man in the country.
Economic experts have thrown their weight on the budget, dissecting its probability while highlighting the chances that it could not take the country out of the doldrums. To review again what the chances are, we're joined by Senior Research and Policy Analyst, Budget Foundation, Enebi Opaluwa. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. I would like to find out what your thoughts are. I'm sure that, of course, you've had time to go through the budget and ingest what the annual allocations are. Which would you say of the sectors are the sectors that have been, that have gotten the better attention, or which sectors would you see need a lot of improvement?
Okay, well, based on the information on the budget that has been released so far, we had the President's budget speech and the budget public presentation by the Minister of Budget and National Planning. So, based on that, the information available is still quite scant. In the Minister's presentation, he highlighted basically three sectors: health, education, and defense. With defense having the largest share, followed by education and health. So, at this point, it might be quite a drawback to do a critical analysis of what sectors outside these three would have the best, the best outcomes. However, education is going to take around 8% of the budget, security 12% of the budget, health 5% of the annual budget for next year. The overall above 1 trillion naira in terms of monetary allocation. So, I think if the budget performance is high, then perhaps we might see some improvements in these particular areas. The security sector obviously needs some serious attention. In fact, there is no sector that doesn't need attention right now in Nigeria. Every part of the country, every sector needs considerable investment and attention. So right now, those are the three sectors that we have the budgetary information for now. As when the full budget is released, they will have the capacity to, or the ability to do a more detailed, in-depth analysis of each of the other sectors.
Well, you just mentioned budget performance. I always say that it's a thing that we never pay a lot of attention to, because how do we know how well the 2023 budget, fared? The Auditor General, of course, and is a report that should be released every year, should be put out every year. We don't really pay a lot of attention to it. So you can speak a little bit more about that, why we don't, do a lot of budget performance analysis. Just hold on. So there's that part. Then I also want, conversations on our budget deficit and loan repayments, and of course some of these things that would also make it really, really difficult to see a really functional budget.
In terms of budget performance, there is a budget implementation report at both federal and state levels. Sadly, the federal level doesn't really come out early, but I think the report for last year is out. But for every budget presentation, there is a review of the current year's performance, which the Minister of Budget and National Planning did during his public presentation of the budget. That was on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was made available as of yesterday. So we've seen some of the documents. Interestingly, one area that really caught my attention is in terms of revenue performance. Yes, while in terms of oil production and oil revenue, that did not meet its targets, the non-oil sector revenue seems to be very, very impressive, over 100% in terms of the pro rata revenue that is expected between January and September, which we find very, very intriguing. Looking at other sources of data, based on the report by the Office of the Accountant General, between January and August, the revenue performance was around 54%, and then adding September, it jumps to a very, very high performance. So these are some things that we are going to look. Perhaps we need to understand how Nigeria performed this good in that window. And contrary to all expectations, looking at the first subsidy policies, the exchange rate policies that we expected would have contributed to some slowdown of the economy. We are seeing that if you compare the tax remittances, the tax revenue between the same time frame between this year and last year, it's higher this year. So these are a few deviations from what we expected to see. In terms of GDP growth as well, the estimates for the according to the budget position seems to be better than we expected. And so, really, that being the case, it is good or well for Nigeria. Well, I think it's something that we need to take a second look at, because these are the foundations that are being used to make projections for the next year. And if we get it wrong, then we might be setting up ourselves for failure already.
All right. So currently, would you say that Nigerians should remain very optimistic? Nigerians have a reason to be optimistic about this budget. Looking at it from the perspective of the eye of economists.
For me, I have a personally, I don't encourage people to be pessimistic. That is just personally. But from I am quite curious, and at this point I'm indifferent. I would like to take more look and perhaps observe a little. At this point, I'm indifferent. All right, it's not something I'm excited about. And if it performs well, very good. If we attain the targets, very good. But I'm not very, very excited about the expectations going forward.
Okay.
Especially if you look at the antecedents, we've not had a very credible performance in our budgets, and this is one of the most ambitious budgets that we have. The federal government has set a very, very large goal before it, and it's interesting to see how that is accomplished.
In social media parlance, they'll probably say that it's aspire to perspire. It's giving motivational, because it's like they're saying a lot of big things, but there's no practicality of how you would achieve this.
Yes, for the country, I think we need to move beyond aspire to perspire right now. We need more things that are much more practical and achievable.
And would you say the 750 naira to the dollar is quite aspire to perspire? Is it very aspirational as well for 2024?
Well, if you are looking at the INA window, that is the rate, and that is the average rate that the federal government uses for all its operations. But when you look at the parallel markets, the numbers are much, much higher. So the exchange is a very tricky area. The federal government has made projections of things easing out. Inflation is supposed to drop. Oil production is supposed to increase. These are these are like, I don't want to use the term that got into my mind, but they are quite ambitious. All right, very ambitious.
Okay, and
I'm quite curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable actually, and if you also look at the our current debt servicing ratio or percentages, is also not very exciting. So you can also quickly speak on that, and remember that we're still, of course, applying for more loans to fund the supplementary budget. We definitely would need more loans to fund the 2024 budget. And so, it is really just the practicality of this budget that, needs to be called to question. Yes, the country needs to improve on its revenue. Is it possible, or is it likely that we'll be able to increase on our oil production? Maybe hit 2 million barrels per day. Nobody knows. But share your thoughts on our debt ratio and how it might affect, the 2024 budget.
So personally, I use the debt to revenue ratio, not debt to GDP ratio. I feel that is quite misleading. Now, for 2022, we had a debt to revenue ratio that was somewhere between 80 and 100. In fact, at some point, it was more than 100%, which was just too high. Basically, all the revenue we made was not even enough to service our debt. For 2023, it's equally high. You understand, in this same 2023, the ways and means were securitized, so our debt stock increase, debt service increase. And then we've gone, at least since this administration came on board, we are looking at least 2 or 3 applications to borrow more. Added to the borrowings that will be coming in the 2024 budget. So we are looking at very, very high debt stock. Mind you, the debt service for next year is going to be higher than that for this year. So there are quite some unsustainable indicators that we are seeing in the budget already. It's difficult to run a country, run a budget when you have very, very high indicators such as debt, when most of your revenue is going to service debt. And when you have issues like infrastructure, you have roads, you have social security, you have social services, education and health that are in serious need of infrastructure. Now, Nigeria's situation is quite precarious. We do not have the revenues that we need because of our major source of income, oil and gas, which has been performing terribly for the last 3 years. Right now, we are around 1.3 million barrels per day. We have the opportunity, based on our OPEC quota, to do 1.7 million barrels per day. But we are losing out on about 400,000 barrels per day, which, considering the high oil prices, we are losing out on a lot. So this is problematic. But the federal government is saying that from next year, it will improve and they will do 1.78 million barrels per day. Let's OPEC quota aside, all right? I hope that works out well. But in order for us to achieve that, we need to handle stop vandalization, stop oil theft, sanitize the sector, plug the leakages. How we are going to be able to do that within the space of less than a year, when we've not done that in decades, it beats my imagination. But like I said, I wish Nigeria the best, and I hope the federal government meets all these targets for the best of the country. Yeah. But some of these indicators are just not, they don't seem practical given the time frame between the budgets.
Yeah, it just feels like we're in some type of loop, you know. Every year we do the same thing. You know, nothing changes. We repeat it again next year. In 2025 budget, I'm pretty sure will be the same thing. You know, maybe that will hit 29, maybe 30 trillion naira. But it's a repeat of the same process and the same things that just never improve or change anything. You know, and that has been the experience at least for the last 15, 20, maybe even 30 years. I'm just in a Bloomberg report that says Nigeria would spend at least 6 times more on servicing its debt next year than building new schools or hospitals. And these things, you know, when you read them, would just really show you, at least give you an idea of what the reality of, you know, our current economic situation is. And so, yeah, go ahead.
It's simple. The debt service is around 8 trillion. And
yes, about 8 trillion.
Now, the budget to the education sector is 1.7 trillion. For health, is still around just slightly above education, but still above 1 trillion. If you do that, is 7 to 8 times higher than the budget for education. So we are spending, like I said, these are resources that could be channeled to much more productive areas that could have long-lasting effects on the economy, on the country, and for generations to come. When you invest in education, we are investing in intangible assets that translate to other productive outcomes. But because of our high debt service, we lose on the opportunity to do that. I think one of the approaches, because the idea is you borrow a lot of money to invest a lot in capital infrastructure that you can now use to stretch out development across board and then pay back in bits. But we realize that because of the poor revenue performance in Nigeria for last year and probably this year, we had to borrow to pay salaries. Basically, for last year, we had to borrow to pay salaries at the federal level. There was no way out of that. So when you are borrowing money and turning it to the current expenditure instead of capital expenditure, then you are already digging a bigger hole. So because you are not investing in assets that can now generate profits for you to even pay back, and then you have to borrow more. So it's a very weird and ugly cycle that we need to get out of from as quickly as possible.
Speaking of getting out of this ugly cycle, let's talk a little bit about the national safety net. And, you know, part of the statement that was made whilst he was presenting the budget was that it will be expanded to cover more vulnerable people, of course, through cash transfers to the vulnerable, and those who are already existing on or who are part of the national social safety net will be graduated to other opportunities. They would empower them with other opportunities. Would you think that this is a very viable option, a very important plan, or a way to get a number of Nigerians, the indigent, out of poverty?
Okay, so I have two, let's say, mixed feelings about that. So the first is the fact that they want to reduce the number of people who are dependent on social security. That is what they mean by giving them more opportunities. So if they support you for a while, they provide opportunities for you to get employment, to get jobs, so that you now get off of dependence on the government, and then they now have the capacity to accommodate more people into the net. So that is the concept behind that social security, where you get support people, get them off social security, where they can now fend for themselves, and then you don't need to give these people are no longer on social net. You ease yourself of this pressure, which is quite good. But that depends on how well we can create jobs. If the jobs are not available, then there is no way these people can get off the social security. That is one aspect. But very good plan gets these people off social security into good paid employment where they can fend for themselves. You have the capacity to now handle more issues. The other side is that the credibility of the social register has been under contention for a while. Now, if you are still going to use the same register to administer social security, then we might still face the same problems that we have. We have people who have jobs and they are on that register and they are receiving social security. I understand that some efforts have been put into the system to weed out some of those let's say recipients, but we still have those cases. We've had situations of where people are registered in states where they did not live in, but because they are states from those state of origins, they had access to put their names on the register of those states. So it's quite a mess. The register has to be cleaned, and that is why when the government wanted to administer palliative because of the subsidy, the state governors didn't want to use the national register because they felt it wasn't credible enough and captive enough of their needs, and decided that to generate their own register that they would use to now administer social security in terms of cash transfers to the poorest of the poor, to the vulnerable. So yeah, the data is a very, very critical factor for the success of those cash transfers in terms of social security.
And I mean, like you said, the credibility of the social register has already been called to question many times, not just by Nigerians. I mean, not just by government, but by Nigerians generally. I don't think a lot of people trust it. But final question to you. I'm sure you must have seen the response from the presidency to Tracker, which is a sister agency to Budgit, in response to the call for frivolous items in the budget to be excluded before, of course, assent was given. I'm sure you must you must have seen that letter. For those who are not aware, Tracker had reached out to the Nigerian government asking that certain frivolous items, repetitive items in the budget, be addressed or be taken out before the budget was put forward and to be signed. But they got a response saying, "I'm directed to acknowledge receipt of your letter, and of course to inform you that the president has already assented to the 2023 supplementary appropriation bill, and as such the petition to review and remove the so-called frivolous items has been overtaken by events." So let's get you speak on that before we let you go.
Okay, all right. So first of all, the rate at which the supplementary budget was presented and passed was very fast. All right. So at the time we all had it had passed second reading, and it was just public presentation, which I felt was just a tick box, and then passing, and then sent to the president to assess. So by the time Tracker had acquired the signatures to, because we identified not just us, a lot of people saw a lot of items that didn't make sense, especially for the last 2 months of the year. What do you need a yacht for? The president is a landlocked state. What do you need a yacht for? So apart from that, there were some issues that we felt needed to be done to sanitize the supplementary budget, and so Tracker put out sent a letter. By the time they were about to send the letter, and then the National Assembly had passed, so they sent it to the executive arm, and the time passes, and before a lot of this is what happened, the president had assented. It was a very, very fast process, And so definitely by the time they were going to attend to our letter, there was nothing, they couldn't do anything. Well, I won't say they couldn't do anything, but that was why they said it had been taken by events, because you cannot tell, you cannot start removing items from a budget that has been passed.
Yeah.
For me, that is not telling for the 2024 budget, because normally we had a period of October to December to review and make inputs. Now we have practically 4 weeks to do this, which is a much more compressed time frame for us to do an in-depth analysis, go through all of the line items for all the civil societies who are into public finance management. It's a shorter period to do a deeper review. The National Assembly is also constrained within the same time frame. So my fear is that hope we don't run into the same cycle which we did with the supplementary budget, where before you are raising up the alarms or saying, come on, take care of this, take care of that, take care of that, it has been assented to. Because if you look, even in the budget presentation, they have committed to a January 1st implementation, meaning that it should be passed and signed before January 1st. So there's a lot of work for civil society to do, for the National Assembly to do if they want to be sincere. So actually comb through the entire budget and ensure that the items that are there are suitable and are going to deliver the development as it was promised. Before this process, Budget has had the opportunity to engage with the National Assembly, the Ministry of Budget and National Planning on what we feel the budget should watch out for. So it is our hope that by the time we finish looking at all of going through the budget, that all of those recommendations we placed about 2 months ago would have been done even before the budget was presented. Because we looked at bonus items, budgets that were out of the mandate of MDAs, and we already sent a letter ahead. And the minister acknowledged our letter and said that they were going to use those things for this 2024 budget. And so we really hope that is done.
Yeah, we need to go, but I don't think anybody expects that there will be any scrutiny on the budget or details, from the executive, from a National Assembly, where the Senate President is wearing, the same cap, as the president's party. And
I can only let's say comment on the things that I have control over, and that is for civil society. Our best to scrutinize
of course,
the
a National Assembly that is singing on your mandate, we shall stand. That's not a National Assembly you expect scrutiny from.
But I hope they do come around and do a thorough job. I do hope so, for the sake of the country.
Good luck to you and yours. Thank you very much, Enebi Opaluwa. Thank you for stopping by. Interesting speaking with you. We'll talk again pretty soon.